And I appreciate everybody turning out for this. So I know we got our brief introductions, but why don't we just go down the row? Tell us who you are, what you do, what your brand is all about. In case anybody here has not heard of Pepsi, I think we should educate them. You want to kick it off, Todd?
Sure. Pepsi is a carbonated soft drink, a cola, some call it. It's quite delicious. Hey, everybody. Todd Kaplan. I lead marketing for Pepsi in the U.S. Happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Nicole Silver. I lead marketing for Volta. For anyone who's not familiar with Volta, we are many things. We're an electric vehicle charging network, and we're also a digital out-of-home media network. You may have seen us in front of a local grocery store, retail, or entertainment venue.
Hi, I'm Chris Sojka. I am the co-founder and chief creative officer of an agency called Madwell. So, not Madewell.
Not to be confused with Madwell, who just took the stage.
Madewell is fantastic.
We love
one letter difference, Madwell.
Madwell and Madewell.
Drop the E.
I can't because Madwell is a justification of my ADHD.
There you
Procrastinate and do a really good job.
I love it. Well, we can talk about marketing in the ADHD generation, I think, in just a little bit, because getting people's attention is probably the hardest thing to do these days. But we'll get to that in a second. What I love about this group is that we've really got representation from all pieces of the industry puzzle, right? We've got our agency representation. Volta, you are both on the brand side, but you're also a media company. And then we've got the big brand guy right here. So, I want to get into a couple things at a very high level, and then we're going to maybe zero in on a few very specific. So right now, let's talk big trends for a second. And look, this is a future of marketing conversation. Every year, the future of marketing changes, right? The buzzword bingo, buzzword du jour. Last year, we were nonstop about the metaverse. Now, I don't know, maybe you've heard people talk about AI. It's only been 48 hours here at Cannes so far, but I've heard it a few times. But I'd love to get an idea of what that future looks like for you at a very high level. Are there different trends, technologies? What are you looking at that informs the work, whether it's on the brand side, the agency side, or in your world, both on the media and brand? So,
yeah, I think, listen, there's so many buzzwords out there. AI, AR, VR, Web3, instant creators. There's so many things that everyone loves to talk about nowadays. But I'd say, as you think about AI and even Web3, right, I think we're in a very interesting time that I think it'll be historic. I think 10 years from now is when we'll realize it. But right now it's so early that there's not a ton to do other than the novelty of it all. It's interesting, learn about it, it's cute. It's almost like, when people had when Ask Jeeves was the search engine that everybody had before everyone knew a Google or Netscape. So it's a very early phase. I'd say at PepsiCo, we're looking at all that. We're taking a very systematic, methodical, being very smart. We're very aware and digging into all the technologies. There's a lot that have some legal risks as well as some big opportunities. So we're working through all of that. But we're excited about where a lot of this can take us and our brand in the future.
Fantastic.
Nicole? So I could give you a lot of buzzwords, but I'm going to pick two. The first one is sustainability. Probably not a surprise from an EV charging company. But I want to call out that here in Cannes, you can see so much focus on improvement, whether it's sustainability or just increasing the products that are being created or the opportunities that are being put out into market. On the stage earlier was United talking about a lot of the efforts that they're doing to improve the emissions and improve what their company does. I think every company is really thinking holistically about how to improve and how to be more sustainable because that's an ask coming from consumers. So that's something that we see. And then the second one I want to sort of play off of the AI is marketing's getting smarter. It's something that I've always really focused on for my organizations. How can we be more data-driven? But whether it's AI, whether it's other technology, how can we be better informed? Volta, our products are very informed. We have specific products using models to be able to recognize tire treads and vehicles coming in. But I'd say as a whole, that's something that we're hearing across the beach, how marketing and marketers are getting smarter.
You're up.
So I get to choose my buzzwords? Is that what it is?
What was it? A buzzword, but what is, at a very high level, what are you focused on as you're planning for the future of our industry from the agency perspective?
the collapse of the value of content and the use of exponential processing power in creating imagery and experiences to power content across the funnel, which is no longer real. There's no longer a funnel, and we basically have to accept that there's no difference between working and not working dollars. In other words, how do you make television commercials all the way down to TikToks all work together, all feel like they work together, and not cheapen the value of what you're doing? Because the up top work is extremely intensive, but down here should look together like the up top work. But we always draw the line, and the line's not real anymore. And that's the first thing that we have to get rid of. And then we can start talking about how everything works together.
I love that. We're going to get into the world of TikTok in just a little bit. So, we covered the big trends. So, like I said earlier, we've got three representation here from three different pieces of the puzzle. As far as the future of marketing goes and the future of our industry goes, what does that dynamic look like, the evolving dynamic between agencies and brands and their media partners? How do you work together in new and different ways? Raja was here from MasterCard yesterday talking about really his focus within the future of the industry being to create more advertising that is additive to the experience rather than distracting or interruptive, right? So how do we work together across the different pieces of our ecosystem to create a more, consumer-centric vision of what works?
I think it's interesting that you ask, because I think the model has to change. I think, and I hate the word advertising just to throw it out there, because I think the model used to be, big brands building an ad with a creative agency and then working with their media companies to almost like a dart, like just throw it in front of their consumer where they are, and I'm going to buy against this demographic, and they're going to be interrupted, see my thing, and then see whatever comes, like a commercial or whatever. Now, if you think of how you consume media in your lives today, anytime I see an ad, I skip it. And anytime an ad comes on TV, I look at my phone. And anytime I'm doing other things. And so it's a different world that I feel like, we've undervalued as an industry the role of earned media and organic social media. And you think of what you consume on a daily basis from text messages, media alerts on your phone, just organic things that you're viewing on Netflix, whatever it is, and where paid media appears, like that's not really a lean-in moment anymore. And so you either need to, A, if you're using paid media, build creative that cuts through and is entertaining, engaging, and really captures their attention, or B, also paint around the peripheral edges. So we've done a lot around content creation, building our own TV shows, creating experiential things on site. There's a whole range of different ways you can interact with your brand, and I think that's going to grow more and more important, and especially how we work with our media partners and with our agencies in the future.
I love it.
Awesome. So I want to take advantage of my seat between both of you and first say that we're all on the same team. At the end of the day, we're all here to reach consumers, to engage them, to provide value, to drive an outcome. And so that's part of it. How do we all work together to deliver something valuable for consumers? I also want to build on what I said about marketers getting smarter with a couple of stats. And so we've done a number of different consumer research studies. I'm sure we all have. And one of the stats that stood out to me from some recent research we did really focused on climate consciousness among consumers was first the number of consumers who care and are making purchases based on sustainability. But second, and more importantly for this group, more than half of consumers were pretty upfront that they're willing to give their information away in exchange for something valuable, in exchange for an experience that's personalized, or in exchange for an experience that's relevant for them, or in exchange for an experience that's additive. And so we take that away, that we want to provide value, we want to all be on the same team, and we really need to understand what do consumers want. I don't think that's new. I think that that's always been the case in the advertising industry, but it's a reminder to kind of focus on the basics and make sure that what we build together is offering value, is offering a platform and an experience that's relevant, not when somebody's going to go on their phone. And that's a lot of what we do at Volta, offering value right before someone's about to make a purchase.
I think we did something recently for Elf, and I think Cora is up here. minute ago.
She's speaking on our
Okay.
stage, I think, on Thursday.
In the
On Thursday.
future, that's a plug for
There
Corey
you
from
go.
Elf
Be here Thursday.
Cosmetics. We made something called Makeup Over Makeup, and the whole premise was, I mean, essentially, how can you use makeup between two quote-unquote influencers, but the talent can vary infinitely, to demonstrate the breakdown of a facade instead of the creation of one. So it's bringing together two people that had some sort of falling apart feud, whatever, and actually not turn it into Real Housewives or Vanderpump rules the entire planet, but actually do something really emotional and make the product kind of be there because it's the brand's values are what's really on display here, and we did that with no media. It wasn't a test to be like media doesn't work, but that's born out of something that I think, you know, I believe at one point your company owns Paramount, and I think we're coming to the point where advertising and entertainment are converging irrevocably, not just technologically, but you know, if you go watch Castaway, it's the greatest ad of all time. Full stop. Mostly for FedEx, with a little bit of Wilson. But really, the whole plot is about him delivering a package while losing everything else in his life. And I think if we thought more, you know, that way, which is what Todd's saying, then we're really actually bringing the consumer in, and you know, and not being like doing the Geico technique of like non sequitur ad. I think that's over now. I think we actually have to entertain them.
I like that, and this is a good segue because I wanted to talk a little bit about the maturation of the influencer space, right? Like we had Paris Hilton here yesterday, arguably the world's first influencer, the inventor of the selfie, right? It's been a little bit of time. Now it's a highly nuanced world of influencers, of creators, of micro influencers with more niche but subject matter specific audiences. What does that space look like? How does it continue to evolve? How do brands play with creators and with influencers in a way that, again, like makes sense to the newer audiences that look to them more than they do traditional celebrities or traditional, you know, TV environments?
I think what's fascinating when you think about the creator economy is I think a lot of people don't know what to do with them because a lot of people say like, oh, I want those 20 million followers, like it's a media outlet. But what they don't realize is it's a one-stop shop. It's a media outlet. They're also the creative that'll be building it, and they're the personality, you know, that's going to be the talent, right? And so, yes, I could go hire Mr. Beast and have him star in a commercial and read my lines, or I could buy an ad on Mr. Beast's network, or I could, you know, have him write an ad for us and behind the scenes. But where you really get the unlock is going all in with them and actually being organic to their audience, their fandom, the things that is authentic to them. What's tough is a lot of brands don't know when or how to let go of the reins because brands want to control too much and want to be involved. And at the end of the day, the authenticity is these people's bread and butter. This is how they make a living. This is what they do. And so if you want to get in that game, that's totally cool. But then you got to be comfortable, know why you're getting in it, not just because someone said, oh, creators are cool, or do something with these influencers and we want their reach. Give them the authenticity to be able to do, you know, what they would do with your brand in a way that they would if you want to do it. And if not, then that's fine too. But I do think more and more companies are going to be working a lot with people like this. We did a lot of stuff over the years with some of them. We've worked with Kabe Lame of TikTok when we were launching Nitro Pepsi, all the way to even how we partner with talent now. We just launched a new campaign with Bad Bunny and Apple Music, and really collaborated with Bad Bunny throughout on the creative development process, you know, on what the creative look and feel is, how we were going to launch a song with it, all the kind of elements to make sure, again, talent, you know, doesn't just want to necessarily, some talent wants to just get a check and be in ads, but for the most part, it's a reflection of them and they want to make something special and something great. So I think you're going to need to collaborate a lot more with talent and treat everybody as becoming more of a creator with their own media outlet as well as their own creative brain and their fame that comes from those two things combined.
Fantastic. Any thoughts?
All right.
I mean, this is your world too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, look, I think there's a distinction happening that's threefold. I think influencers have really come to be defined as effectively devoid of irony, right? Like, we know that the commercialization of what they're doing is part of what they're doing. Whether they sell their lifestyle or they sell a subject matter, the advertising part of it is part of it. Whereas creators, here's how not to do it. You'll have them make an ad in the style of their creation. He's describing how to do it. Go to them and say, do you like us? What would you do? Let them create. And then I think that is a very important distinction and different way of looking at things. And then I think we have, there are real influencers we don't call influencers, who are people that actually are experts in things. The real first influencer for me is like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like, that's actual authentic influence. There's no authentic influence in the sort of pay-to-play arena on social anymore, and that's okay. I think that allows us to sort of slice things up and play with them in a way where we can, again, produce things that people want to engage with. We're working on making a song with a very, 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 very big reggaeton artist, and the deal was, you keep the masters. I'm not going to buy this song from you. Your brief is basically a Frida Kahlo quote, which is like, I'm not fragile like a flower, I'm fragile like a bomb. Obviously, and I said, just make art. That's it. If you make an ad, I don't want it.
That was actually the perfect segue to what I was going to say. Last night on the boat, shout out to anyone who survived the boat last night.
And RIP to a lot of people I love.
I was talking with someone about Volta or EV charging, and that we had tested working with a couple of electric vehicle influencers, people who charge in their communities and talk about the experience. And the person I was talking with said, are there a lot of those? And I said, it depends on the market. The folks we had worked with were on the West Coast, where there were a few people who are authentic and are talking about their experiences charging. And that's the right place for those, because that's where there's higher electric vehicle penetration and there are a higher number of chargers. That model worked there. It might not have worked in some other parts of the country. So I agree that sometimes it's a lot more authentic, and folks who are influencers might not be as official influencers, but they can drive behavior, they can make an impact. And so I think my point on that is that the definition of influencer has expanded from what it started with. It continues to be, but there's so much more. There's how is the experience created? How is it authentic? Who are you trying to influence? And all of those fit in the category.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to get into a few twists and turns now. So we talked about this before. One of my favorite topics to talk about with our community is talent, right? Because at the end of the day, we could talk about influencers, we could talk about AI, we could talk about trends or technologies, but regardless of what you may hear, I firmly believe, right, the future of marketing is driven by the people in your agency, in your marketing organization. So my question to you is, do you have an approach, a philosophy, guiding principles that you adhere to when bringing in talent, when building out this next generation marketing organization, making sure that you can twist and turn with new trends, with new technologies, but what do you look for when you're bringing in people?
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion. I think all the questions we've had up till now is a good setup, because the technology is changing, the models are changing, all the inputs are changing, and it's the same people that need to do all the shit. We got to still get it done. And so I think the skill set needs to evolve beyond that as well. And so we need people, I think, agility is probably the number one skill I look for in talent on my team. I'd say cultural acumen is another thing, of people who are intellectually curious and want to kind of learn and outside the walls of the company, know what's going on in the world and all of that. And then, passion for, creativity and how to collaborate with people. Because the other thing is you have to, I think the role of at least the talent in our company, we play a more active role, kind of how we collaborate with our agencies, our media partners, really kind of roll up our sleeves and get dirty. And so we need people who are easy to kind of move and ebb and flow as the world changes along with it. I think that's one of the most important skill sets.
I love that. Okay.
I agree 100% on the learner mindset and folks who are willing to learn. Also, because I've found that those type of people and that characteristic tends to be more coachable and willing to accept and receive feedback, which is so important when everything's changing. The two other things that I would add to that are whether you call it grit or resilience, being okay with failure and getting back up, we're going to need to test things. The industry's changing. They're not always going to be successful, and folks have to be okay with that and willing to try the next thing. And the third is ultimately great communication. Kind of goes without saying as a marketer, but I think about a modern marketer as the first person in the game of telephone. You're sending the message along, and then you might be bringing in your external partner, your agency, or someone else. And if it's not clear at the beginning, the outcome at the end of the game of telephone, not going to be comprehensible. So you really need to make sure folks are good communicators for the circumstance and situation they're going to be in.
I love that.
Yeah, for me, I want to know how well they are at disassociating their identity from their supposed professional title. So basically, a good example is we don't have art directors. We never have. Just not a role I was going to allow. People coming in speaking fluently in 6 programs. You should be able to conceptualize and also execute on various proportions. But the idea that there's somebody who's just sort of directing the art, but you will forever lose the technology skill set. So anyone who's really like, this is what I do, and I'm this, and if it changes too much, we're sort of doomed, because you know what? In like 3 years, people are going to be able to animate complicated things with what looks like a video game console. And I remember seeing books when we started 14 years ago, and it'll be in July, that I was like, wait, you designed this and 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 this. And I dropped out of photo school, and I was like, could barely work 3 cameras. So it's only to get more like that. And the identity should be, do you love this? And do you love changing with it? Because if you do, this is a good place to work for you. It's a good kind of cast. And if you don't, that's okay. Just don't work here.
I mean, I think it's fascinating because, when I would ask this same question a few years ago, I got a lot of responses about really bringing in subject matter experts and specialists, right? Like, we need to really build our core capabilities around programmatic or, whatever, like, it was about building out core capabilities. And now the pendulum is clearly really swung to, you can't just focus. You have to have expertise, but you got to have people who can evolve and adapt and change, because that's what our industry changes so quickly.
It's also so tied to the economic conditions that a couple years ago, everyone was growing. And coming out of the last few years with the pandemic and swing back, we've all been thinking about how do we do more with less. And the generalist or the skill set of someone who can learn is a different skill set when you have to maximize your resources than when you're growing.
Absolutely. So I don't even know how much time we have left. I got a couple more questions. So we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but again, with everything going on, right? Like, whether it's TikTok or a million other things, there's so much grabbing for consumers' attention right now. And as a marketer, right, like that, literally every day there's something more that you're fighting against. And your job then just gets harder and harder and harder every day, right? We're only going in one direction. There's only more things that are vying for people's attention. So how do you cut through the clutter? Like, what is your approach to the thumb stopper, right? Like, getting people to like actually pay attention for 1 second because you're putting so much effort into the content, into the creative, into this effort. How do you get people to slow down and pay attention for a second?
I'll take a crack at that. I think it starts with a couple of things. I think one is you got to know who you are as a brand and what you stand for, and how you're seen in the world, and have a healthy self-awareness as a brand. So I think a lot of brands don't have a sharp enough brand position or positioning. So I think have a distinctive point of view. But then 2 is how you execute that in the world, given most of the content is seen on a phone, in transit, doing other things like multitasking. Gone are the days where you're in your living room and you're just watching what's in front of you and you have no choice. And so you're very seldom in a situation where someone's going to be consuming something in a lean-in moment, unless, A, you give them a reason to lean in, like they were sent this from their friend, watch this video, or, as somebody I'm interested in this music artist, I'm going to just go myself, dive into it. And so it really just comes into how you want to manifest that creatively, but also with what I'd say is B, this cultural insight. I think it's everything that needs to be anchored in a cultural truth, because that adds context to the creative process. So strategically, I can achieve my, get to buy of I need to get my consumer to do this, buy this, and have something that is a strategically sound ad, perfectly executable, that no one will give a shit about or pay attention to, unless you give them a reason to, in the context of where they're viewing it or why they care about it in the world today, that it matters to them. So those I think are the two things I'd say.
Context is everything.
That's an awesome setup. So when I was at Moat several years ago, when we would go have conversations with folks, one of our first slides was a huge picture of a goldfish. And the key point was that the human attention span is now shorter than that of a goldfish. So it's a good visual as we're right near the water. And I think that's the starting point. Human attention is short. And how do you create the moment in the right context? So we think about at Volta, the context, reaching someone in their community when they're likely to be receptive, when you're offering something of value for the experience they're about to have, whether they're about to go buy their groceries, whether they're about to run into their local pharmacy and offering something they might need, or offering them news about their community or an update about masking up during COVID. How do you offer the right context when someone's likely to be receptive to mitigate that very short attention span?
I don't mean to be disagreeable, but I think it's a false construct. I think the idea that we're competing more and more and more and more for more attention is sort of like being like, wow, this was a field before and now it's a city. What are we going to do? Live like it's a city. And I say that because, what's happening is things are converging predictably. We named our agency Madwell 15 years ago and said, we're a full-service agency. And everybody was like, there's two of you. Go fuck yourself. And then they were kind of right, except for the little companies that needed people to kind of do everything and run their paid search and do mediocre design and decent copywriting. And I think what I see happening is not an overwhelm, because if there's anyone in this room who has not binged an entire season of something one time, one weekend, then I'd be surprised. So I don't believe our attention span is shrinking. I think it's the way that we're utilizing it that's changing. So as marketers, our goal fundamentally is to give people a reason to sort of feel like they're drawn in and they're participating. And that really is about capturing that attention span, but offering them a place to go. We actually hyper-focus as a society now, right? That's what binging is. That's what all those hours are. We don't, it's not just Facebook. You're like, shh, what? Shh. No, we actually go very deep on things. We still read books. We listen to entire audiobooks. We watch movie after movie after movie after movie. But how do you get them to do that? Advertisers are not very good at that, because we're basically still saying, hello, I'm here to interrupt your day, and would you like to buy this? But the more we lean into the idea that it's a trigger to start a conversation, to actually have a dialogue, and that's much more. It takes a lot of confidence to believe you don't need to have your logo recalled. Or I love wear out. Where the idea, the commercial has to reach just before it wears out. It's like, have you ever asked someone on a date 32 times and been like, all right, I think I've achieved wear out? It's the strangest concept to me. So I think the changes are ones we can embrace. And yeah, there's a generation caught up in it. Like my mom is overwhelmed, but there are generations coming. Every new generation is more fluent. It's an extension of the nervous system.
Well, first of all, I love the disagreement, because sometimes it's when everybody agrees, then clearly you can say, okay, we're heading in this direction. But I think there's also, to your point, right, we can embrace some of the problems or some of the obstacles and create opportunities out of them, to your point.
I still love what you're doing. Immediate debate in theory.
All right. I've got two more prompts here. First, before we wrap, I want to put it out there to each of you, if you have a question for your fellow panelists, because I can ask questions all day, but I'm curious if you have anything that you'd like to ask each other, and if you don't, that's okay.
I got one. So,
Okay.
Bad Bunny campaign, pretty cool.
Sure.
I'm curious what
Yeah.
else is coming from Pepsi as both a media company and a consumer and a marketer and someone who admires your campaigns.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we got a lot coming. We're always busy cooking up something at Pepsi. I don't know if any of you guys saw, we recently announced we're going to be changing our logo and visual identity. And so that has been something I've been working on for about 4 years time.
Wow.
And with 400 million internal stakeholders, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so that will be rolling out starting
Congrats.
thank you. And so that'll be starting to roll out this fall in August. It's our 125th birthday of Pepsi on August 28th. So we'll be doing a lot around that and how we eventually roll that out. And we'll have a lot of fun surprises and things coming out from that as we gear up for next year. So that's definitely keeping me busy, though.
Very
Well,
cool.
we're excited.
What was the original name? Fred's Drink?
What's that?
What was the original name? It was like Fred's Drink? The original?
Oh, Brad's Drink. not
Brad's
Fred.
Drink,
I don't
yeah.
know who Fred is. It was Brad's Drink.
I'm sorry.
The brothers.
Yeah.
Fred is his cousin, yeah.
Yeah.
Fred's
Tried to take
a
credit.
knockoff.
Fred Flintstone, yeah.
Okay, well, I do have one last question for Todd specifically, although I welcome your input here.
Sure.
CMO tenure is maybe at its lowest level in ever, depending on what stats you look at, especially for new incoming CMOs, 18 months, 2 years. What can we be doing as either as an industry or the individual level to set CMOs up for success in our industry?
I think it's super straightforward. Everything we've been talking, and it's actually interesting in the context of this panel, because everything we've been talking about is the world outside is changing, everything's changing, change. So as CMO, you're fighting with all this change externally, trying to keep up with your team, build your brand, all that kind of stuff and everything. Internally, if you have a fight of the role of marketing, if you talk about it as the CMO seat, it's basically, to me, it's a ding on the role of marketing. Companies either value the role of marketing and brand building or they don't. You don't see CFOs going through the same thing because guess what? Every company has a balance sheet and has to put up numbers, and that is quantifiable. And whether they do a good job, bad job, it gets done. They have their earnings. They have to go what they do. Marketing is a little more subjective as a field. How you prove the ROI, how you prove its worth, what's the value of a brand, especially often to a CEO who may or may not understand that. They may have come from finance. They may not understand the same thing. You may have not built it in the right way. And so I think, to me, it comes down to the internal advocacy of the role of marketing and the value it provides to the company, both in the short term. Yes, you got to get your lower funnel and get your ROI and get your sales and all that, but also in the long term. The people who just focus on the short term, guess what? Sometimes times are going to be shitty and you're not going to sell a lot of stuff. You don't want to hitch your wagon to all that. There's a bigger picture if you're playing the long game and the short game at the same time. That's the thing. And so how you align your internal organization to the value of marketing, the C-suite, and proactively show them the vision, what this company or brand could be 5-10 years from now, if, as opposed to playing defense and all the just incoming questions and what if, why didn't we, how did we kind of stuff. And the people who don't play enough offense are typically the ones that you see kind of cycle out, in my opinion.
I know you didn't ask me,
No,
but because
please,
I already introduced data here, I also really encourage anybody thinking about that question to look at the data. There have been a number of really good articles recently about CMOs moving into other C-level roles, moving into CEO roles. And so I think it's important thinking about marketers need to be on the pulse of change. They need to be functionally aligned with every other part of the business in order to be successful. And so looking at the question of CMO tenure, where does the CMO go next? There's both a positive and a less positive interpretation. And so it's important to look at that in answering the question.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I think if the opportunity avails itself for an agency and a CMO to really, really learn about the business and not just think like as marketers together, then that relationship should be just like the ending of Thelma and Louise. And I don't mean like everyone goes down. It's just at that point you're bonded and you're responsible and accountable, for the success. You're not just there as an agency support. And that has happened organically, but I think often CMOs are left as a punching bag from every direction. And that's pretty crazy because they're the ones building the intangible financial value. And without that, the CFO will be counting a lot less things.
I like it. All right, I think that is time. So why don't we give a big round of applause for our panelists? This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.